Dun, dun. Well, hello everybody. It's Jeremy, the existential wine guy. Hopefully you're tuning in, and let me welcome you to another Wine Wednesday. I am broadcasting live at Chez Marron, or at least the kitchen of Chez Marron, and we're going to be talking a lot about some of my favorite wineries in Northern California. I get a lot of questions. Hey, what wineries do you like? Where do you like to go wine tasting? Those sorts of things. So I thought we'd go over a couple of wineries that are close by to Sacramento, and you know, it's something that's kind of along lines of striking distance from this area. The one thing that a lot of people don't understand, checking notifications. One thing a lot of people, it's something they don't understand, but don't think about, is when we talk about wine country in California, a lot of people automatically assume Sacramento, or not Sacramento, they assume Napa and Sonoma, and that's wine country. Interestingly enough, there are over 4,000 wineries in Northern California, and to be perfectly honest, all of California is wine country. You can't go anywhere, you know, drop yourself anywhere in anywhere in California, and drive an hour in any direction from that, and you are going to find a vineyard, a wine producer, a tasting room. It's just, California is just that perfect state for winemaking. It's not just that we have just a couple of different types of varietals that grow really well in this region. Like if you go to certain areas of Italy or France, you know, it's all very segmented. It just seems that California is such a diverse state in terms of its geography and the altitudes for it, is that it produces so many amazing varietals. Like I said, anywhere you go, you know, there you are. There's a winery or some sort of wine producer close by. Luckily, I live in Sacramento, which means I am just smack dab in the middle of all these amazing areas. Things like Lodi, the Sierra Foothills, which would include Placer County, Amador County, as well as Placer, El Dorado, Amador County, some of my favorites. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and one thing I would love to see from you is, what is your favorite winery? You know, with over 4,000 wineries in California, obviously I'm going to miss a couple. So I'm going to talk about the wineries I like, and hopefully we'll hear from some of the people out there as well. So starting off, let me introduce myself. I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. I'm a wine industry veteran. I've been around a while, and I specifically do, or I consult with tasting rooms for everything from customer experience, training staff, all the way through taking care of your marketing. Also, there might be a kind of a fun little announcement in a couple weeks, and I might start representing some wines. So that should be fun too. So I'm excited to do all of those things. Also, before we get started on some of my favorite wineries around here in this area, I'll tell you what I'm drinking. This is a 2017 Pinot Noir from the Arroyo Seca area, Folktale. Absolutely lovely, and so you know, we'll get started with that. So one of my we're going to start with the Lodi region, actually. So one of my favorite, you probably heard me talk about it on previous, in my Instagram, as well as previous Facebook and Instagram lives, is the winery. And you know, this is the thing, you're live and all of a sudden you're going to forget about it. It's actually Bokish. Bokish Winery in Lodi is absolutely one of my favorites. And the reason why is it really goes against the typical type or sort of reputation that Lodi has. A lot of times when we think of Lodi wines, we think of maybe some really big fruit, maybe even overripe, lots and lots of Zinfandel, right? Bokish is actually a Spanish-style winery, and they do a couple things that are really different. The wines are just a little bit lighter. They do a really good job of controlling the alcohol. So while they have this amazing Grenache and Tempranillo, you're going to find it much more Spanish style in terms of lower alcohol, probably in the 13%, and it just makes it makes the bottle go a little bit longer. Actually, kind of leads to a second bottle most of the time. But it's really they have a really wonderful outdoor area. A lot of the pictures that you'll see on my Instagram of some selfies I've done, including the one if you're on Facebook or Instagram right now, that picture was taken at the Bokish Winery. So absolutely one of my favorites. Again, I'm a sucker for Spanish style wines, and they really do it in a much less California style and much more of a Spanish style. In fact, their Grenache just won a competition in Spain. It was the first American winery to win a gold medal there. So just absolutely huge. So if you get a chance driving out there, it's again one of my favorites. Another one that I just visited recently is St. George's. And again, they actually do some Spanish styles, but like a lot of Lodi wineries, they do multiple styles of varietals. So Spanish, Portuguese, and again, they do it with a little bit more of a European style, an old world style, rather than a big, big bouncy, overripe, really heavy style of wine. Both of those are in the Lodi area, and they were ones that I absolutely recommend. Let's go real quick. For those of you who are just joining me, and thank you so much, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy, and right now we're talking about wineries I like to go to for whatever the reason is. Again, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear about the wineries you like. Also, I wanted to hear about the varietals you like. And one of the reasons why I'm asking about that is, for whatever reason, I've fallen back in love with Pinot Noir, and my tastes, vary from, I don't know, week to week. And sometimes I just want a really nice cab, and I just start drinking cabs for like a month, and then the next thing I know, I'm falling in love again with Pinot Noir. And I'd like to say it's one of my favorite varietals, but I love so many different types of varietals. There really seems to be no end on it. So again, let me know what your favorite varietals are. Also the wineries that you like to go to, and I'd love to know why. So from Lodi, let's move on to Amador County, and Amador County is where I kind of cut my teeth in the wine industry. I started working at wineries up in those areas, and got a real feel for the varietals that get grown up there, the different styles, everything from these sort of big heavy Zins and using French versus American oak. I hope you listened last week, because we had a really good show about French versus American oak, and especially how it affects Zinfandel. So and this is, I guess I have to give, in the interest of full disclosure, one of my favorite wineries up there, of course, is Wrenwood. And Wrenwood is one of the wineries I did work at. And even after working there and seeing, basically how the sausage was made, I had such an amazing experience working there. And more than anything else, I learned so much about wine from the winemaker, Joe Schabel. And he's a real big fan of a lot of French oak, and he makes an extraordinary Zinfandel. Now, one thing about Amador County is, if you like Zinfandel, you are in heaven, because everybody is making Zinfandel, and they're making, each winery is producing 3, 4, some 5, sometimes even 8 different styles of Zinfandel. That area up there, every vineyard is just a little bit different, and they're doing all sorts of fun stuff up there. So if you are a huge fan of Zinfandel, and you haven't made it to the Amador area, specifically the Plymouth area, do yourself a favor, run out there and start doing some serious tasting out there. They're doing amazing things. Now, what is kind of interesting, just from my own personal palate, as amazing as Wrenwood is, and first of all, the grounds are beautiful. It's just a wonderful place to enjoy wine. They really do it right up there. And for all the Zinfandels they have, and they have many, and they're all delicious, one of my favorites is whenever they produce their Barbera. It is through the roof. It is one of those things that actually just surpasses almost everything on the tasting menu for me. Joe Schabel, who is the winemaker there, also consults for a couple of other wineries out there, and every winery he consults with that does a Barbera, that Barbera is absolutely amazing. So definitely you want to go out there and check them out. There's also a couple others in that area. Actually kind of like driven a little bit. Just every time I go in, I seem to have a really good time. And also, you know, as we go in from winery to winery, one thing that is so true is as good as the wine can be, if your experience at that winery fails to be a good one, it doesn't matter how good the wine is, you are just not going to go back. So, you know, Wrenwood, again, is, you know, top notch. They do some absolutely fantastic things in that area. Now, if you go a little bit past that out into the Fairplay area, I have two wineries I would absolutely recommend. And again, full disclosure, one of them is one I've done some work with. That's Perry Creek. I've got one of their glasses. This glass actually holds an entire bottle of wine. You can see the advantage to that, to be sure. Perry Creek, again, they have an extraordinary Barbera. They have two tasting rooms, one at the old sugar mill in Yolo County, but their main one, where they actually have their crush facility, is up in Fairplay. It's a little bit of a ways to get to. It's you know, lots of windy roads, but I think that once you make it into the Fairplay area, it is a completely unsung region for wine in Northern California. There are just amazing producers, and what they're doing there is not only are they producing really great wine, but they're giving a great experience, but they're also you know, some of these guys aren't necessarily stuck on using varietals. Oh, thanks for Russ is just saying fun things there. Not only are they doing fun things with the varietals that actually grow in that area, but we have some fearless wineries up there as well. And another one of my favorites, because the aesthetic is completely different than anything up that you'll see in that area, is E16. And if you ever get a chance, one thing that's great about E16, they do have some wines that are, some wines that are the fruit, it comes local, but they're also producing some stuff from just, you know, they're grabbing it from all over the state. They produce a Pinot Noir there that from the Santa Lucia Highlands up there. And it's one of my favorite Pinot Noirs that's getting produced right now. They also, and I don't talk a lot about white wines, but they have a Grenache Blanc that they are producing there that is absolutely fantastic. So, and another thing that when you walk into that particular winery is the aesthetic is completely different than any other winery that is in that area, and that way I would actually include all of Amador, as well as the Fairplay is actually in El Dorado County. It just barely, it's just kind of over the line. But one thing that you see a lot in these areas, and it's fun, but you see a lot of country, you know, that country chic look that is, you know, it can be homey, and it certainly is very different than, you know, like, you know, than my home, to be sure. And then you walk into someplace like E16, and it is like you are walking into, you know, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. It's got a very clean, classy look. Robin, who's one of the main people there, definitely has created a feel and an aesthetic that is completely different than anything else you're going to see in this region. Also, one of my favorite guys behind the bar, Mick Bruja, he is absolutely fantastic, and he knows everything, I mean, seriously, everything about all of the wines there. And one thing that I would recommend is when you go in, and if fortunately, or hopefully Nick is waiting on you, don't look at the tasting menu. Don't look at any of the notes. Just have a conversation with him, because he's one of those people that's absolutely passionate about wine, and he gets you excited without having to wonder about what you're supposed to be tasting or anything like that. Real quick, I want to say hi to a couple people that have joined us. Obviously, Russ Race, thank you. My brother from another mother. Laura, thank you so much for joining me. Drew, always good to have you here. He's on Instagram. And there's a couple other guys that I can't read because my eyesight is so bad. So I want to thank you all for joining me. Again, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy, and right now we are talking about some of my favorite wineries, the places I go to taste just for fun when I'm not just exploring a different region. Also, again, I would love to hear from you. What are some of your favorite places? I want to learn more about wineries. I want you to find out I want you to tell me the type of varietals you like, and if you do have a recommendation for a winery, I want to know why. Why is it you're one of your favorites? So please, any comments you can give me, I would absolutely love to have them. So we talked about up in Fairplay, our friends at Perry Creek. Again, one of my favorites. Everything they do there is great, but again, I love their Barbera. E16, if you're not tasting their Grenache Blanc, you are not, watching Shakespeare the way it was supposed to be watched. It's just that good. They also have like 2 or 3 Pinot Noirs that are absolutely fantastic, including some fruit that comes up from the Santa Lucia Highlands. So those are ones to absolutely check out. Now, I would be remiss if I was not going over to El Dorado County, and specifically the Apple Hill area, which I think is just a fantastic area, Camino as well. There are so many wineries that I would love to talk about up in that area. We don't have time for all of that, but the two that I definitely want to mention, my first wine club that I ever joined was Boger, and I know that the big behemoths up there. They're producing huge amounts, a huge case lot. You can find them now in restaurants and supermarkets, and they're really doing an absolutely fantastic job. But it was my first. And it was kind of like that moment. I am still nostalgic for that winery. I think that their tasting room is absolutely fantastic. When I'm up in the area, that is absolutely the one that I bring my friends to. And if I can't even recommend which wine to go after because everything they do there is just absolutely fantastic. So please go on in, check that out. They do have quite a few Zinfandels that I just think are absolutely off the charts. And now that I think about it, I do, because I'm a Barbera fan for sure, in restaurants around Sacramento, you can absolutely find them, and their Barbera is absolutely worth checking out. Madronia, I have to say, is one of my favorites as well, and I have to tell you why. When I proposed to my wife, which is a crazy story that maybe I'll write about someday, when we finally got down to it and she accepted, and we were both so happy, I went to go reach for a bottle of wine to celebrate, and swear to God, this is like 2 in the morning, and I realized that I almost had nothing. And the only thing that I had was the Fiore from Madronia. And if you don't know this wine, it's served in a smaller bottle. It is a sweeter style wine. I'm not usually a huge fan of a sweet wine, but it's what we had, so we opened it up, and every time we taste it, it just reminds me of that day and just all of the love I felt at that particular moment. And I think that's one of those great things about wine. It brings you back to a different time and place if you will let it. So they also have a really fun tasting room. And also, one thing that is really great about Madronia is they do their stuff a little bit differently. They actually you don't taste their white wines first and then then the red wines. They actually taste the red wines first and end with the whites, and they have a really good reason for that. And I will make sure that or you should, that I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm going to let them tell you about it when you go and visit. So you definitely need to check that out. Again, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. I've got new people. Get that back. Thank you. Sandy, hi. Thank you so much. And Carrie, oh, so good to see you. Carrie is actually one of my friends who, we were I met at Renwood when we were working together there. So I'd already mentioned Renwood, but definitely check that out. Again, I want to hear from you. What are some of your favorite wineries in sort of the Sierra foothills, Northern California, Lodi area? Now, we are getting sort of close to the end. So, I'm talking a lot about that area, and people are obviously, the first criticism is going to be, why aren't you talking about Napa and Sonoma? Napa and Sonoma, there are lovely wineries all over there. I will mention a couple in Sonoma that are my personal favorites. The first year we ever did the Wine Road, which is an event that happens in January, usually over that President's Weekend. And one thing that's really fantastic about that is it's super inexpensive. It usually is like $50, $55 there for the weekend. And there are somewhere like 108 or 110 wineries that are participating. And I've done this event for years, and sometimes we go with friends, sometimes we go on our own, and we always hit some of our favorite wineries, and then we go ahead and just explore. We take one day just to find new and interesting places. So one of my absolute favorites is Portalupe. Portalupe is in downtown Healdsburg, and if you haven't been there, you really should. They focus mostly on Italian varietals. They have some award-winning Barberas. Actually, their Barbera, a lot of times their fruit is coming from the Amador area, and I always think that that's very interesting. But across the board, it's a slick winery. I don't join a lot of wine clubs these days, but if I did, that would be like #1 on my list. So if you get a chance to go into that area, I would certainly recommend it. I'm seeing who else is here. And oh, actually, so Russ is recommending one of his wineries that he likes to go to. Narrowgate Vineyards Winery up in Placerville. Yeah, you know, I haven't been there. I've heard nothing but amazing things. So that's definitely one I have to check out. If anybody else has some suggestions, Drew, I know you're watching right now, and Robert, thank you so much for joining in. I really appreciate it. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what type of wines that you're into, and specifically the wineries that you like and why. So down in downtown Healdsburg, we were just talking about Portalupe. Also Longboard, and I have to say, growing up a little bit in Hawaii, anything with a surfboard on it, I'm pretty much a fan of. So Longboard, they've got an extraordinary winemaker there, and everything they do is fantastic. But actually, just their tasting room is really cool. You can go in, lots of surfboards and surfing paraphernalia in the background. There's usually some surf movie playing in the background as well, and just really kind of a lot of fun. What else? There was one other winery that I wanted to talk about in Sonoma. Actually, one thing I'm a huge fan of is Zinfandels from the Dry Creek area. So those wineries that produce something like that, that area has something so totally different about it. Even when I worked at Renwood, they brought in some Zinfandel from the Dry Creek area, and it had this weird meat, almost bacony note to it that it would sound sort of disgusting, but it really worked in this particular area or with that particular wine. So it's really kind of a lot of fun. Real quick, I'm just going to check this right there. Okay, good. And I've got just a couple more moments. So again, anything else that you could suggest for me, I would love to hear about it. But right now, those are kind of my go-to wineries when I'm just like goofing off by myself, or if I actually have friends, I want to take them there as well. Also, I should recommend one more winery because I think that they're doing some fantastic stuff, is Peshmel in Geyserville. Thank you. That winery, we know that it's actually like sort of a distant relative of my wife. And every time we go in there, first of all, it's just got a great aesthetic, but we're treated incredibly well, even when they don't know it's us coming in. And their Zinfandels, from Rockpile, fruits from Rockpile, and a few other areas are just absolutely fantastic as well. So those are my sort of favorite and immediate go-to wineries that I want to bring my friends. Like when I especially have friends from out of town or other states, more specifically, and they want that sort of California wine experience. That's where I take them. I know that I get a lot of viewers after we've shut down, so please let me encourage you. I'd love to hear the wineries that you go to, your favorite, and would like to talk about them on a later broadcast as well. So I'm really kind of at the end of my time, and it's too bad because I think that this is one of those subjects that could go on forever, and we could just talk about it. But everybody, we need to make dinner. We need to go and do our other stuff. So I want to thank everybody for joining me today. Again, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. We're talking about wineries and wines that we love. So I'd love to hear from you in the future. If you have a comment, even after the fact, please put it down. I want to hear from you. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week. Have a great Wine Wednesday. Ciao.